Hello, friends. Listen to this story from the Gospel of Luke. 8 days after Peter said he believed Jesus was the Messiah, Jesus took Peter and John and James up to the mountain to pray. While Jesus was praying, his face started to glow, and it changed right in front of them. His clothes were dazzling white. All of a sudden, Moses and Elijah were there on the mountain, talking to Jesus. They were talking about what was going to happen in Jerusalem. Just as Moses and Elijah were getting ready to go, Peter said to Jesus, "I've got a great idea. Let's never leave this place. This is awesome. I'll make houses for each of you so we can stay here forever." Peter was so excited he didn't know what he was talking about. While saying this, a cloud came all around them, and they were really scared. Then they heard a voice from the cloud. "This is my son," the voice said. "Listen to him." After the voice had spoken, Jesus was alone again. They said nothing to anyone about what they had seen. I'm not always a big fan of reality. Reality is that there's a new and not unexpected war in Europe, and we don't know how this is going to end. Reality is almost 950,000 Americans have died as a result of COVID, and millions of lives have been forever changed by it. Reality is that people go to bed hungry and unloved, while I have more than enough food and love in my life. Reality is that the world and the church are changing so rapidly, it's hard to keep up sometimes. Reality also is that in the person of Jesus is the fullness of the glory of God, and that every once in a while, if we're in the right place at the right time, and we're paying attention, we can catch a glimpse of that glory. Reality is that while we live in this world, our glimpses of God's goodness and glory are bracketed by pain. So how do we reconcile these opposing realities? The disciples saw Jesus for who he was and is for the first time on that mountain of transfiguration. They too lived in a world bracketed by suffering, a world crowded with people in need of healing. They were on their way to Jerusalem, where Jesus told them he was headed to suffer. They didn't want to believe it. They didn't believe it, but it was reality. A chapter before this, Jesus had asked them who people were saying he was. They came up with all kinds of answers. Maybe Elijah or John or any of the prophets brought back from the dead. Only Peter had the right answer. "You are the anointed one, the Messiah," Peter says. But they needed to be as clear as possible about who Jesus was and the power and the authority he carried. So he led them up a mountain to teach them. Jesus took Peter, James, and John to a very special place, a thin place where heaven meets earth, where God's glory is revealed, which sealed the vision of God's glory into their very beings so they could continue the work God was giving them to do. Oh, to be in that very special place where only Jesus grabs your attention and surpasses any beauty you've ever seen, where you cannot see any of the problems of the world, where life and belief are so crystal clear. That sounds good to me. It sounded good to Peter as well. He wanted to stay there forever. And as soon as he expressed that thought out loud, he and his friends were overtaken by a cloud that terrified them. They were told to listen to Jesus, pay attention to Jesus, God's chosen, not to institutionalize or analyze that wonderful feeling or that vision. Just behold and listen. The cloud lifted, and there, in the place of the vision, in the place of the brightness, was Jesus, alone and on a mission to heal and reconcile, to gather all into God's healing embrace. In that holy purpose is where God can always be found. The scriptures say Jesus touched the disciples and led them down the mountain. So Peter reluctantly packed up his newly stretched capacity for God, and using new eyes of faith, saw the manifestation of God in Jesus as he continued his earthly ministry. We are asked to behold and reflect this transfigured reality. A powerful God holds us in a loving embrace, even when we cannot tell it, feel it, see it, or have any evidence that it's true. God's glory can break through at any moment, through our memories, through our shared stories. We too are called to listen. We too are called to not keep the God we know on the mountaintop, separate from the God we meet on the street in our everyday lives. We are called to live lives which participate in the transfiguration of the world, where realities are formed into something more beautiful. While we live on this earth, our reality will be the tension between the glorious and the horrific. That's just the way of this world. As we walk together down this mountain, I invite you to place yourself in a place of prayer, where you can be open to the places and faces in which God's glory can be seen, and not miss what God has in store for us along the way. God bless you all.